We're standing at the location of where almost 9 years ago, on March 22nd, 2003, Alice Ross, who was a 71-year-old wife and grandmother, was tragically killed as a result of a staged auto accident. This is a picture of Alice Ross. Innocent victim. This accident was arranged and intentionally committed by individuals hoping to cash in on the accident by filing fraudulent insurance claims. At the time, the young man who committed this act was convicted of manslaughter in the second degree in the Queens Supreme Court, and his appeal was denied, forcing him to serve his sentence. And I want to thank District Attorney Richard Brown for his successful prosecution of this particular case. 2 days ago, authorities charged almost 36 people with racketeering and money laundering in the largest ever fraud case involving the state's no-fault insurance law. The law requires payments of up to $50,000 for victims in an auto accident regardless of fault. Insurance companies suffered a loss of almost $113 million. Thankfully, no deaths have been reported or associated with this particular fraud scheme. Not only does this result in a huge loss of revenue for the state, but the idea that a person's life was tragically taken from her, Alice Ross, is totally unacceptable. Seniors are especially vulnerable to being targeted in these types of schemes because perpetrators believe they are less likely to be confrontational or dispute an accident. I'm proud to have introduced a bill, Assembly 6177, Senate 1685, sponsored by Senator Seward, who's chair of the Insurance Committee in the State Senate, that would impose tougher criminal penalties on those who engage in stage accidents. A person would be guilty of staging a motor vehicle accident in the second degree, which would be punishable as a Class C felony if he or she commits the offense of staging a motor vehicle accident in the third degree and has been previously convicted of an insurance fraud crime within the preceding 5 years. A person would be guilty of staging in the first degree, punishable as a Class B felony if a person commits the offense of staging in the third degree and causes serious personal injury or death to another person other than a participant in such offense. It's time to send a clear message to those perpetrators that seek to cash in on dangerous auto accidents that could potentially lead to the injury or death of another individual. In a study released last year, according to the Insurance Research Council, almost 20% of all no-fault claims in 2010 had elements of fraud. Let me note that the State Senate already passed this legislation last year, and it has been held up in the Assembly Codes Committee. We had some movement at the end of session last year. We were hoping we were going to get it to the floor, but due to the end of the legislative session, it did not happen. So we're trying to get momentum to move the bill that had already passed in the Senate in the Assembly this legislative session. I want to thank New Yorkers Against Insurance Fraud, and I'll now call upon former Assistant Brooklyn DA David Schwartz to speak on this issue. David?
Thank you, Assemblyman Weprin, and thank you for being a champion for the people of the state of New York, for courageously fighting insurance fraud. You and Senator Seward have been champions on this common sense, logical piece of legislation that is going to combat an epidemic that is going on in the state of New York at the present time. New Yorkers are losing hundreds of millions of dollars a year, maybe $1 billion a year, due to fake car accidents, staged accidents with the intent of committing insurance fraud. Now, the no-fault fraud law was very well intentioned when it was passed. But however, we have criminal enterprises, we have criminal elements that have taken advantage to think that the law was meant to give victims of car accidents some relief right at the very beginning, where we don't find fault, where we pay for their medical damages right away. And to think that criminal enterprises have hijacked the no-fault fraud law is unconscionable, absolutely unconscionable, that these criminal enterprises have taken advantage of this law to the tune of $1 billion a year. And that's why we have champions like Assemblyman Weprin coming out and saying enough is enough. It is logical to pass a law that states that if you stage a car accident with the intent of committing insurance fraud, that's a felony. I don't see what the problem is with passing a law that addresses an epidemic in our society right now. So we're going to ask the Assembly and the governor to act on this immediately. How many more incidents do we need? How many more Alice Rosses are there going to be until we get tough on this epidemic? And certainly in the news recently, we have the 36 arrests. That one criminal enterprise alone was $250 million. It's time that we wake up. It's time that we address this epidemic. Every single local DA is on board with this law. All this law does is give them the tools they need to prosecute these crimes. And all the Long Island DAs as well they're on board as well. So thank you, Assemblyman Weprin. And New Yorkers Stand Against Insurance Fraud will keep fighting for this law as well as many other laws out there that will address this horrible epidemic of no-fault insurance fraud. Thank you very much.